Hi, everybody. Welcome to Radio Dead Air Tech Q&A. You've got questions. We've got guesses. I'm Nash. I've been doing Radio Dead Air for ages and ages. Finishing my, to doing this, I'm an IT professional. With me is always my producer, Mike Gehrman, who also works in IT. Going to be taking your tech questions.
It was good. The sound wasn't up the first time because it missed your bobbles, and you had whole new bobbles the second time. So
great. If you got tech questions for us, you can send those to requests at radiodeadair.com and we'll answer them, or we can put them down there in the YouTube comments. They're there as well. And also, we've got a YouTube chat as well, because I'm double streaming here. I'm a jiggling and juggling. Take that as you will. We will be answering your tech questions tonight, but also there's some news to talk over.
So there's a piece of news you didn't send me that I wanted to mention briefly.
What was that?
New York City started up an AI chatbot for business owners and landlords.
Yeah.
And it was amazingly wrong about nearly everything. So amazingly wrong that apparently about 2/3 of the way through the day that it was up, they were frantically reprogramming it in the background, and it stopped being quite so wrong. It was still a lot wrong.
Yeah.
But it was no longer giving the advice. Can I fire someone for trying to start a union? Yes, absolutely you can.
Yeah, it was going to get somebody sued if people keep following its advice, because this garbage sucks. The technology sucks.
Now, I can't say that in this case because I haven't looked into, and I don't really have any way to, mind you, the backgrounds of the programmers. They could all be related to employment attorneys. In which case it was some amazing programming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with this with most of these LLMs and chatbots and stuff, it's not really programming. It's just they're taking OpenAI or ChatGPT's stuff or Grok AI or whatever you want to call it, and they're just slapping their own stuff on top of it. And they're like, done. It's an AI. You don't know what to do, right?
Now, at least I will say they limited its inputs to certain categories, because there are certain things that would come back and say, I can only answer questions about these fields. You have to go somewhere else to look for that.
Unless you got real creative with the query, and then you could probably get around it and break it. Most of them have a way to get around it and break them, because it's still this is just a crappy tech. It's terribly implemented. Anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
Our first news story this week, kind of interesting on a lot of fronts. According to Bethesda.
Yeah.
So take this as, great assault. But according to Bethesda, the developers internally working on the Elder Scrolls 6 are already playtesting, and they have playable versions that they are, quote, having fun with.
Yeah.
Now this is interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, everybody.
Well, number one for me is, hey, new Elder Scrolls stuff. That'd be fantastic.
Well, mainly everyone was expecting this to be pushed out even further, because when Bethesda releases a big game, they tend to focus entirely on that game for a number of years.
Yeah, and then they tend to basically rest on their other properties for a while, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because it can keep people from getting just really burned out on, they released this game. Oh, now they released this game. Oh, now and I don't have time to play any of them. And let's face it, one thing about Skyrim is that it's got a massive amount of replayability.
It does. Well, one that doesn't, that has been pretty much pooped on all across up and down the gaming sphere, is Starfield. That was Bethesda's last big release, and right now everybody's anticipating the first DLC, which number one it's not quite such a big of a deal for Bethesda, because they sold the DLC packaged as part of the collector's edition. So if you bought the collector's edition, you already have the first DLC free. So that's not going to be making a big, sales bump for Bethesda when it comes out. The other thing is it's
also the fact that Starfield Starfield is one of those games that had a massive amount of potential that they did not realize.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the entire exploration mechanic is so pointless and boring, and a lot of it is pointless and boring. Some of it's good, a lot of it's pointless and boring. Mainly folks were hoping that the first DLC would pull a No Man's Sky, and maybe they could fix a bunch of this stuff and make the game fun again. We don't know if that's going to happen. I'm saying that the reception of that first DLC is going to determine pretty quickly whether there are going to be more Starfield DLCs, and as a result,
or if Starfield is going to just sort of wither.
Yeah, if how well these do is going to determine how fast we get the Elder Scrolls 6, is what I'm saying. Because Starfield is just such a mess. I wouldn't doubt that they have a playable internal version that's going to go through a lot of revisions. I still think we're at least 2 years out from even potentially.
Unless they've been working on it really hardcore, just really quietly.
Well,
and, they're a lot further along than we thought.
Well, they do work in parallel. They do have multiple teams working in parallel with each other, which was a problem for Starfield. Because back when Starfield was being developed, they had a team working in parallel on Fallout 76, which was also a disaster. And they actually peeled people away from Starfield to help maybe fix Fallout 76, and it didn't work quite so well. So there is parallel development that goes on at Bethesda. If Starfield had done better, I think we would have seen the release date for the Elder Scrolls 6 pushed further out. But the fact that they're sort of leaking this information makes me believe they are kind of closer to a completed Elder Scrolls 6, simply for the fact that Starfield is kind of tanking, really. I mean, I've been playing Fallout 3 on the stream, and I realized this is a game from 2008, which is 16 years old now. Yes.
Still playable. Still very playable.
And I'm having way more fun with Fallout 3 than I did
with Fallout 76.
Well, no, than I did with Starfield. Because
Nash, that's understandable because everything is more fun than Starfield.
In Starfield, if I was on a planet and I just pointed myself in a direction, I started walking, nothing was going to happen. I might run into some alien life that, I didn't know anything about, or I'd run into a procedurally generated base that was copy pasted from a bunch of different places. But I wasn't going to see anything like life. I wasn't going to be like I'm going to go to this place and I'm going to walk, and along the way, here's a Deathclaw, and there's a bunch of raiders that are fighting it, and the raiders are running at me because the Deathclaw is running at them. And there were so many things that were just life. You could feel it as part of those games. Yeah. It's not a part of.
Did I ever tell you my favorite Deathclaw incident?
What's that?
So I'm playing one of the Fallout games, and I'm coming around a corner, and there's a Deathclaw, and I'm like, oh crap! And it turns to attack me, but then coming around another corner is Super Mutant, and the Super Mutant shoots the Deathclaw, and the Deathclaw is like, oh no, I'm going to kill him first. You stay here.
They do have an aggro chart inside in their brains.
And I'm like, I'm just going to go this way.
Yeah. The whole, just stuff could just happen in a Fallout game. That would be like crazy and fun. There's nothing like that in Starfield. There are some of the missions are entertaining here and there, but the game relies very heavily on missions, and you can't just go out and wander and poke around and what's over here. And if you wander, you poke around, what's over here? Oh, there's some gold you can mine.
There's rocks.
There's rocks.
There's more rocks. There's different colored sky.
This is weird alien that's just, you shoot it twice, it's dead. Okay, nothing's really, So anyway, I think that depending on if they can turn Starfield around, and they might have some idea to do it. If they can turn Starfield around then I feel like that's going to push Elder Scrolls 6 further out. But if they can't, I think we're going to see Elder Scrolls 6 a lot faster.
An earlier version, which may be a rougher version.
Well,
remember, well, it depends. It depends on how much they have to rush it out, because Bethesda's owned by Microsoft now, right?
Yeah, but on the other hand, these games are all using the same. This is Creation Engine 2, which is the same as Creation Engine, which is same as Gamebryo. It's the same engine.
It's the same engine, but unless they make the really dumb decision to have AI write a bunch of their quests, there's only so fast you can get quests written by your people.
Again, I'm pretty sure they've done a lot. If they're doing early editions of it, then I'm pretty sure there's stuff in place already. I'm figuring a lot of the stuff that's going to have to come is voice acting and final polish. It's a lot of stuff, but there's probably a lot's already there, just because it's the same stuff they've been doing for 2 decades now. Good God. Like all the way back to Morrowind. It's the same shit. There are still commands from Morrowind that will work in Starfield in the console. Same damn commands. Exactly. Anyway. Next up, we've talked about how AMD has been using, instead of coming up with a affordable Ryzen 3 for the 7000 series, AMD has just been, and they did this with the 5000 series too, they've been relying on their previous generation to act as their budget hardware. And it's been a little annoying, and it looks like they're going to continue to do it, because word has come down, there are going to be new Ryzen 5000 CPUs that are called the XT series. Now, if you remember, they've done this before. There was a 3000 XT series, and what these were is they are pretty much the exact same CPUs as non-XT. They're just clocked a little higher. And that's it. But keeping AM4 alive like this is starting to get really irritating.
Well, I'm wondering if they're doing it because their AM5 production lines either aren't at full speed yet, or they're not at the point where they're selling enough to say, okay, we've got these AM4 production lines that we could convert to AM5, but there's no point.
No, it's
or we can just make more AM5, of course.
It's simply cheaper, is what it is. Yeah. They've got these. It's simply cheaper to do. Instead of, we haven't seen a Ryzen 3 processor in it's been at least 5 years since we've seen a Ryzen 3 processor. If you're not familiar, the way the tiers of processors used to go is you would have the Ryzen 3, the R3 or the i3 on Intel side, and that was the budget entry level CPU, enthusiast entry level, actually. And Intel still
could still be really viable. I mean, depending on what it was. Yeah.
Intel still has an i3. The i3 12100F has been an amazing $100 CPU for ages and ages. And it's the only entry level CPU that works with DDR5, as a matter of fact. Another issue about AM4. AM4, they used to have, the last one was, I believe, for the 3000 series. They had a Ryzen 3 CPU, but then came the 5000 series, and they just stopped making Ryzen 3 processors. They relied on the earlier 3000 series to be their cheap entry-level CPUs, because they kept making them. They just reduced the price. Now they're kind of doing the same thing, but this is with an entirely different platform. And the disadvantages here are they're still using DDR4. They're limited on PCIe. PCIe 4 is the upper limit there. There's no PCIe 5 on AM4. No USB 4 unless you get an add-in card. A lot of these options that are with if they just made a Ryzen 3 CPU and a B650 motherboard, people could have these modern features with an entry-level gaming system. But this reliance on AM4 to keep making AM4 processors. Well, it's nice if you have an AM4 motherboard and you don't feel like upgrading stuff, I suppose. But it's also the 5000 XT, they're really literally offering you nothing new there. Like nothing new. These are the same CPUs, just clocked a little higher. So 5000 XT, a 5700 XT, is the same as a 5700X. And we're not going to see a 5800 X3D XT or whatever, because those are already clocked as high as they can go. It's because of the 3D RAM. They can't jack it up anymore. I mean, these are really kind of pointless in a lot of ways. Like the X3D CPUs at least add gaming performance, extra gaming performance. That's the big thing they add with it. And having a 5700 X3D, it's a little cheaper than a 5800 X3D, but you get the bonus gaming performance. These don't have that. These are just the same as they were already there. And it's very frustrating that AMD is doing this. I'm sure it's good for their bottom line, but it's not good for the platform going forward. It's not good for AM5. It's the starting CPU for AM5 is the 7600. I think actually 7600F is the one that doesn't have a integrated graphics processor. But the R5 7600, and that's not a cheap processor, but in comparison, I think it's around $200 right now. Let's see, Ryzen 7600. That is around currently, it's around $200. Their entry level, quote unquote, entry level CPU for AM5 is $200. And that's holding them back on a lot of scores. That's holding them back on home adoption of AM5. And it's also holding them back on corporate adoption of AM5. Because the big one that corporates likes to buy, they love them i3s. They love the Ryzen 3s too. They like the entry level ones that had most of the features, but were really budget focused. You saw those in offices all the time. Those were the workhorse machines. And we're just not seeing that. There's a lot of people on AM4 with first or second CPUs don't trust the used market. I mean, even if you don't trust the used market, they're still selling brand new 5600s and stuff. You don't need a 5600 XT. It's kind of pointless. The performance boost you'd get for a 5600 XT over 5600X would be negligible. Almost as negligible as the difference between a 5600 and a 5600X. Because XXT, the difference, the previous XT generation that came out, the performance boost was negligible.
It was up to 200 megahertz, which is not that much.
Yeah, I mean, and they still have the other CPUs in production. This is a weird choice. And I don't know how this is going to affect later this year. We're going to see the Ryzen 9000 series.
Well, the one thing we don't know about this is where they're going to be releasing this too. It might not be a US release.
True. But it still shows they are still developing on AM4, which is that's time and energy and budget that could go toward AM5. And
unless they just don't have the space. Again, it could be a production line issue. If the production line for AM5 is either saturated because they just say, hey, we are making all the ones we can, or they're just going, the ones we're making aren't selling. Hey, we can have some people work on upgraded AM4s. We just don't know why they're doing it. It'd be nice to know why they're doing it.
It's also the motherboard manufacturers have kind of put AMD in a corner with AM5. The prices on even a B650 board are still just
Ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, no, Chris, the 5000 XT, that's not old stock. Those have to be brand new processors, brand new silicon with a brand new spec that have to be tested at higher grade. Then they have to be packaged and they have to be stamped and the whole 9 yards. This is not leftover stock. Leftover, the 5600 X3D and the 5700 X3D were leftover stock. Those were 5800 X3Ds with bad compute cores. So they just shut those off and rebranded them as lower levels. These are brand new CPUs. This is something completely new. Also, they noted, and this is one that's just kind of baffling me, the Ryzen 8000 APUs, the ones they just released a while back, that are monolithic dies and they're made for, their graphics cards and CPU in one. Now they're releasing those with the graphics part disabled.
Yeah, that is.
So though they're releasing those, the faulty ones there. But why? I mean,
to free up warehouse space. I got nothing.
Because I mean, any of the non-monolithic dies are going to perform better than the monolithic ones. That's been like consistently across the AMD, the Ryzen line. Any of the monolithic ones they release for the APUs perform worse than the multi-core, multi-CCD, the chiplet design. So it's it's just weird. I will point out that the 8000 are their first AI CPUs, which nothing is using the AI call functionality of those CPUs.
Nope.
Nothing and nobody are using it. Like nothing is touching it. There's no, I'm sure there's a dev kit out there somewhere, but nobody's using the damn things.
There was a story, another AI story about Google saying, hey, phone manufacturers are going to put more RAM in their phones so that our AI stuff we load in phones will actually work better. And I'm like, who's asking for this?
Well, yeah, they want to load the AI into memory all times on their phones. And I'm like, do you understand how battery life on phones works? You want to, let me see if I get this straight. You want to keep a program running in background that requires an extra 8 gigs of RAM on top of what's already in the phone. And you want that running at all times. How is that not going to kill the battery? And it's AI, so it's not. Apparently that this takes a ridiculous amount of compute power. So if it's in the background at all times, you're going to kill the phone. We do have another Google AI story because this is just irritating as hell. So Google has been working on their Gemini and their AI, or they're calling it the search generative experience, because I think they're starting to realize AI is getting a bad name in the industry.
You think?
It uses their chatbot, their chat GPT style LLM to generate search results that are wrong and lies and dumb.
Yep.
And currently you could say, no, I don't want that. Please turn it off. And it turns off. Well, Google has decided for certain users, and they haven't set out the criteria yet, they're just going to turn that back on.
Well, they've also, unless I read the article wrong, they're also saying, okay, we're not going to have it be automatically visible. You can turn it, you can toggle it on and off, which is if they're going to have it there, that is a better design than it having always be there. Because I don't need a chatbot to tell me information about Little Caesars if all I'm doing is, when is my local Little Caesars closed? I have this strange desire for bad pizza.
Well, it's the whole idea that they're going to opt you back in after you've opted out
Oh, that's awful. No
That's
question, no questions whatsoever. That's awful.
that speaks to me. At least it says to me as a user. The users are telling Google in very large quantities, no.
We don't want this. This is BS.
And the only reason they would be saying, well, we're just going to turn it back on anyway, is because so many users have said no.
Yeah. And they're saying we need to turn some of you back on because we need use case data.
Because none of you want this.
And my response to that is, you have use case data. People have turned it off. Your use cases, nobody wants to use it.
Yeah. And if you're having to force it onto users who already don't want it, you're in trouble, aren't you?
I would think so.
You've dumped all of your cash, all of your research, everything into this garbage. And you're wondering, well, how the hell are we going to make money on it? Nobody wants it. Well, we'll make them want it somehow. This is
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Idiotic.
Well, it's
poor business practice. Hang on, I've got more. What happens when you let MBAs run a tech company? Bone stupid? Let's see here.
Yeah. Ed Zitron, he's a writer who covers this sort of stuff, has been saying, based on this sort of behavior and looking around, he said that by the end of this year, we're going to see the AI crash. We're going to see the bubble pop. Because
unless someone comes up with an AI model, I'm not even going to call it AI. I'm going to say pattern recognition model that cures cancer. That just goes, we found the cure. It cures all cancer ever. Then we'll go, yeah, that was good. That was worth spending money on. What other diseases can you work on now?
Yeah, universally, the rollout on this has been just as aggressive, irritating, useless, and just overall, awful.
It's crypto too,
and people rejected it because it's not even just like there are use cases for large learning model systems. We've seen it. We've been using it for years.
It's not what people are trying to sell it as now.
Right.
I saw an article this week about people companies trying to say, we're going to put AI in your fridge and in your dishwasher. And I'm like, why? What does my dishwasher need a large learning model for? Because I'm going to be honest with you, all I need to do with my dishwasher is turn it on. And when it's done, I expect everything to be clean. And if it's not, it's because I forgot to wash the Rice Krispies out of the bowl. Or rather, let's go with the Raisin Bran. Because if you don't wash that Raisin Bran out of the bowl, and it sets up, the dishwasher is not budging.
No.
And if your dishwasher does budget, that's an amazing model you got right there.
Yeah, I mean, we have appliances that already, there's nothing that this is going to add to the appliance in terms of value or performance.
No.
Just like, why did your fridge never needed to tweet? We had refrigerators that tweeted. That was at the height of another bubble, the Internet of Things.
If I'm at work and I go, I'm stopping at the store on the way home from work, I can't remember what I needed. Was I out of milk? I don't need to have to ask my fridge. If I get home and discover, oh yeah, I meant to buy milk. I got everything else. I meant to buy milk. I've got another grocery store 3 blocks away. I'll just go get milk.
And it didn't work well back then because it was cheap and rushed and just meant to sell.
Well, and that's what happens. I'm going to say, that's what happens with appliances. They'll say, we're going to have this thing in the appliance that'll be amazing and you will love it. And then the appliance manufacturers will go, that's only going to be in the high-end ones. We're going to have a much cheaper, extremely less useful one in what we sell to most people. And I'm going to give you the real world example. You have a microwave.
Mm-hmm.
Does your microwave have a popcorn button on it?
Yes.
Do you ever use the popcorn button?
No.
Do you know why you don't use the popcorn button?
Because it sucks.
Because it sucks. And the reason it sucks is on the very high-end microwaves, there's apparently additional sensors in there for popcorn, for their popcorn button,
mm-hmm.
to make it work. But people wanted the popcorn button on the lower end microwaves. So all it is on the lower end microwaves is a special timer. It doesn't have the sensors, and that's why it always burns popcorn.
You never use the popcorn button. And now people don't even use the popcorn button on the expensive ones because
they think it'll work like the because the popcorn manufacturers now put on the bags, don't use the popcorn button. And just don't.
It's become accepted because that's how they screw. Yeah. Anyway, the last feature they really pushed on appliances that I enjoyed was energy efficiency. That's been useful. I appreciate that. That's
if your power bill is going to be lower between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m., they're charging you less power. Yeah, absolutely. Run the dishwasher. Then I'm asleep. I don't care.
Yeah, the whole energy efficiency thing was love that, but that was that's the last real innovation they've needed to make. It's a damn dishwasher. I don't need to ask it.
The only time I'm going to be upset about the dishwasher running between 10 a.m. and 5 a.m. is if something happens to it and I walk downstairs and go, that's a lot of suds.
So, all right, that's the news for this week. Now it's time to actually get to your questions. We've got some. We got a tough one came in via the comments. Don't worry, we will work on the tough ones. Don't worry, that's what we're here for. But
we'll give it a try.
We'll give it a try. We've got some lower level ones too. Easier, I would call them. So this one's from Stephen R. He says, "Hi Nash and Mike," or "Hey Nash and Mike. I'm still on AM4, and I'm planning on upgrading once I get my refund back. Maybe. I know the Ryzen 9000. I know the Ryzen 9000 CPUs are coming soon. Does that mean we'll get new motherboards too? I know X670 and B650 are forward compatible. What features are going to be added to whatever comes next? I'm asking if it would be worth it right now to go ahead and get a B650 motherboard and a 7800 X3D, or if I should wait for the 9800 X3D and the new motherboards." Okay. Well,
I think we're a few months out from the 9800 X3Ds.
Probably October and November they'll be announced, and they won't be in sale. They won't start selling until next year. So if that's first of all, that's your time frame.
So maybe next year's refund, you look at that.
Yeah. The thing about this is, and this is the question that folks get a lot with technology, is should I buy now or later? The only difference between buying now or later is you might get a deal. First of all, let's go back to the difference between what the coming motherboards from AM5 and what they already have. We've got X670, X670E, B650, B650E. The big change features over AM4, you had DDR4, you had PCIe 5. Those were the big ones. USB 4 on some models, USB 4. What's going to be added to the next ones? Probably more USB 4, I think, is going to be the big one. Other than that,
maybe some more lanes, but I don't know.
Maybe more PCIe lanes. But other than that, I don't expect to see large changes between X670 and X770 or whatever they're going to call it. You don't think YouTube streams work? Yeah, it's goofing up again. Let me try that again. Let's see. There we go. Restarted it. It goofs up. I'm going to have to look at that. I'm using a plugin for it and it goofs up sometimes. All right. I don't know what's going to really separate the two. I can't think of any features that are. Maybe Wi-Fi 7 will be added to be more and maybe faster NIC cards, like 10 gigabit NIC, because right now 2.5 is kind of a big deal, but 10 is going to be
well, and a number of X670 cards and X670 have 10 on them natively as well. Not all, but a number.
So we're not, PCIe 6 is still a few years away. So we're not going to see that.
No.
We might see a little bit more standard USB 4. My point here overall is that there's not going to be enough of a difference between X670 and X770 or whatever that comes next. I'm not going to, there's nothing compelling to get me to upgrade mine. I'm planning on this motherboard to last for years to come. And I'm planning on skipping the 9000 series, seeing what they have for the 10,000 or whatever they call that Ryzen. And that's going to last me for another 3 or 4 years to come. That's my system. As far as the Ryzen 9000 CPUs, it's not going to be a huge upgrade. Maybe 30% performance boost over what we have right now, which that's nice. But if you've already got one, not a big compelling reason for me to replace my 7900X. The only advantage I could see to waiting is there will be discounts on the current stuff when the new stuff is available. That's about it. That's the only big reason I can see to wait. If you want to go ahead and get it, I'd say now's a decent time. Go ahead and get it. B650, 7700X3D. That's a really good gaming platform. I would go ahead and maybe jump on that. I don't think there's a huge advantage to waiting. And like USB 4, it's going to be one of those where it's going to be a while before that's widely adopted. Like, I don't think we're going to be seeing USB 4 hard drives for a while. I don't think that's going to be a while before that's really broadly adopted. And the only big difference, the only big advantage to USB 4 is it's going to have more bandwidth. So faster transfer speed.
Which, for part of my job, would be nice. But yeah, again, we're not going to see it in computers probably for a couple, 3 years.
So, and if that becomes vital for you, you can get an add-in card. Like a simple little card will give you USB 4 dedicated just for that purpose. And that'll probably be like 30, 40 bucks for one of those. That seems like a better plan than waiting an entire year to upgrade your entire system. I don't see where there's a big advantage to waiting for the next generation of Ryzen. If you already, like, if you're on AM4 and you're waiting for it, but I don't think it's going to be screaming faster. I think it's just going to be a nice little incremental upgrade. I don't think it's going to be a lot to write home about. They might have made some advances on X3D. They're definitely going to be competing with Intel, as always. They're going to have a stiff competition from Meteor Lake this year because Intel's doing some major revisions. They're finally doing their first chiplet design. So they're going to have some big competition coming up, and they're obviously going to do what they can to compete. But I don't think there's anything earth-shattering coming. And the 7800X3D is already a gaming beast. So if it was me, I'd go ahead and go for it. Anything else to add?
No, that's it.
Okay, this next one, we had a Steven and now we have a Stephanie. That's nice. This next one is from Stephanie. She says, hello, Nash and Mike and Floofs. Okay, do you know how to get a better signal out of a TV antenna? We don't have cable TV, but I thought it'd be neat to try to get some broadcast channels through a leaf antenna, but it's giving me fits. I've got the little powered booster coax thingy thing that came with the antenna, but that doesn't really seem to do anything. There are channels I can't get to come in, and some of them break up really badly. Is there anything else I can try to improve it? Okay. First of all, if you're trying to use over-the-air antennas for digital, and that is quite common, and it works pretty well, and the picture is really nice when you get it to work. First thing I will tell you is most, if not all, of the indoor antennas are bullshit.
Yes.
It's just the nature. It's been that way since back in the day with rabbit ears. There was a reason people would put antennas on their roofs and run cables down into the houses. The inside of your house is going to block a ton of things, especially the transmission waves for television. If you are just, I understand the Leaf is relatively inexpensive, and for what it is, it's a fairly well designed antenna. But indoors, it's still contending with being knocked down by a bunch of things. What I would do, here's the recommendations if you're going to stick with it. The big one is put it up to a window. Don't leave it inside. I know they say hang it on your wall or something. That doesn't work. I've had a Leaf. It doesn't work like that. The best place to put an antenna is against a window, because the window will allow, there's no blocking of the transmission signal. The window glass doesn't stop it. So glass offers no resistance. It will catch the TV waves or transmission, no problem. There's also, there are a couple of apps you can get. I don't have any one specific I recommend, but there are apps you can get on your phone that use GPS to determine which direction you need to point your antenna to get the best signal. Look for OTA antenna or antenna. Just search for antenna in your app store. You'll find an application, and it will allow you to take your phone and stand and point it in a direction, and it will tell you, okay, here's where the antennas in your area are. You should put it here or point it this direction. You might have to move the antenna to a different window. The other thing that would help is height. If you have a 2-story building, put it on the 2nd story, because the higher up you can get, the better your options are.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I did, I looked up this antenna. Now, I'm assuming it is the Mohu Leaf antenna. Yeah, I could be wrong. And I'm just looking at it, and I'm going to say the coax cable that comes with it doesn't look spectacular.
Sure.
It doesn't look like it's got great shielding. And one thing about Signal is the cabling can make a huge difference.
Sure.
So you might look into a better coax cable with better shielding and see if that helps out any as well.
Honestly, if you really want to do this, the Leaf is not a good option. There are options you can find on Amazon for directional antennas that aren't very expensive. We have one. I got one for us. Not only is it directional, it's got a little motor in it. Let me see how much I spent on that. Because it wasn't very much. I mean, the Leaf is like $35. And I know you already have that, so you already got money invested in it. Let me see how much the antenna got for us.
While you're looking at, I'm going to say something about the one I just found on Amazon. I'm not going to give the listing. It's an antenna, okay? And it's got styles and sizes, okay? And the sizes are standard size, 8.5 by 11, and legal, 8.5 by 14. And it comes up with an antenna when you're on 8.5 by 14, but when you mouse over the 8.5 by 11, it shows a pack of paper.
Amazon, you're doing wonderfully. This is the one we have. It's not that much more expensive than a Leaf, but look at everything you got here. We mounted this outside. It comes with a small mount that you can attach to your house, or you put it on a pole by itself. An easy way to run one of these is get a flat coax cable. They do make them, and just run it under your windowsill. You can like close your window over it. Maybe you want to put some foam alongside it for insulation purposes. But you can close your window with one of those flat coax cables. And this, not only does it mount on a pole, but it's got a little motor in it. If you push this little red button down here, it rotates. It rotates the antenna for you, so you can point it any direction you need to. That works really well for us. It's a nice little antenna, and I can just direct it whichever way we need to. It works. But if you are sticking with the Leaf, just mainly position it, use a window, and try to put it up as high as possible. That's the best recommendations I can give you for using an indoor antenna. They're not great. They have never been great, going all the way back when we had UHF and VHF. They if you had like rabbit ears inside, you were always going to get a less than adequate signal simply because of just being inside. The inside antennas are always limited.
Remember taking a piece of aluminum foil and wrapping it to extend the rabbit ears to hope that it'll pick up better signal?
Yeah. Didn't really work. Although
I don't have too many recollections of it working very effectively.
Although I don't remember why, but UHF always worked better indoors than VHF.
Probably a wavelength thing, if I bothered to look it up.
Yeah, UHF, we always got the UHF station, which was Fox around here. That had all the syndicated shows and stuff on it. For some reason, that always had a better signal strength indoors than VHF. I don't know. All right, next question is from Anthony T, which your name is Tony T? Really? I'm sorry. I mock, but I don't. But anyway,
you should see the names of some of my coworkers. I tell you.
Hi, Nash and Mike and Floofs. I've got $275 left out of my tax return. What should I upgrade? Its current system is a Ryzen 5 3600X, 16 gigs of G.Skill DDR4, MSI B450 Tomahawk motherboard, Gigabyte GTX 1660, 500 gigabyte Western Digital M.2 drive, 650 watt Corsair RM650 power supply, 2 terabyte hard drive, I don't know who make it, and a Silverstone Primera PM01 case.
Which is an okay. I will absolutely get that case. That case is a pretty okay case.
Right. If you only could upgrade one thing out of all of this, that GTX 1660, that would be the thing to upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would be looking at a Radeon 7600. B450, does that have the PCIe 4? Let me look at it. MSI B450 Tomahawk. So if that's still PCIe 3, that might be an issue there. Let me see here. I know the B350 was PCIe. Let's see.
PCIe 3.
It only has PCIe 3?
Well, okay, so the ones I'm looking at only have PCIe 3. That doesn't exclude the possibility that someone made a B450 with PCIe 4.
Well, is it the B450 Tomahawk? MSI B450. We just got a specific model. So
yeah, sorry.
Specifications. Yeah. Let's see. PCIe Gen 3. AMD made a really irritating choice with the lower end GPUs, and that is it only has 8 lanes of PCIe 4, which means if you try to plug it into an older system, it's only going to get 8 lanes of PCIe 3 because the lanes are physical,
which might be less effective than what you currently have. Although 1660,
well, it's still going to severely limit that one of the lower end graphics cards. $275. I know there's a 4060 is down. Let's see. There's a 4060 are coming down in price. Let me see. Although those also, I think they have the PCI, GTX 4, they're as low as 279 for one of those. Let's see. GTX 4060 lanes. How many lanes are there? 8 PCIe lanes. Dang it. They did the same damn thing. Freaking.
In this case, your best thing to do might be to save the money up and then upgrade at a later point, or
whatever
you'd be looking at a motherboard and a video card upgrade, and I don't think you can fit that in $275.
Well, even if you're buying just the video card, whatever you get is going to even with the hobbling of the PCIe lanes, it's going to beat the 1660 because that's just such an older card at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that
then you look at your next upgrade being the motherboard.
Next upgrade would definitely.
So you can take full advantage of that video card.
Yeah, next upgrade. Of all the things on there, I would get, if you have one thing to upgrade, I would get a new graphics card. Whatever you get is going to be better than the 1660, hands down. So going forward, you're probably going to want to move to an AM5 socket at some point, because that would, or maybe get lucky and find a B550 motherboard that has PCIe 4 on it, like used or something. But yeah, the weak link on your list there is that GTX 1660. It's you will get much, even having the Ryzen 5 3600X, the graphics card there is really going to make the big difference on there. Everything else is pretty solid. I mean, the 3600 is getting a little old, but that's still perfectly functional.
I will say, if you had about $100 more, you could get a 7700, which has 16 lanes on it. And take even more advantage, but
yeah. So, but yeah, the graphics card, I would look into seeing what you can afford at that level. Either 7600 or a 4060. That's around the price range you're at right now. Or look at something used if you feel like it. Someone in the channel mentioned 6700 XT, which is a pretty good that's a pretty good value at that price. You can find it for about those prices. Maybe a 3060. If you could find a used 3060, that would probably be a good buy as well. Because the 3060,
if you wanted to experiment, you could get an Intel video card in that price range as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't recommend it, but you could.
A 4060 is not terribly much more impressive than a 3060 because they were fairly close in performance. So if you can get a used 3060, it's an option there too. All right, let's see. I'm going to double check if we got anything else in via email
before we go to the big one.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, this one. Whew. All right, this came in from YouTube comments. This was from Xenot Hedgehog. I think I'm saying that right. Xenot Hedgehog. Oof. This is one of those questions. It's just oof. I'd like some advice on a problem I've been having for a while. As you may be aware, most laptops have the setting to turn off the screen when it doesn't sense any input for a period of time or to prevent screen burn. However, for several months, whenever my laptop's Lenovo Legion Y520 screen turns off, it becomes completely unresponsive and nothing short of a hard reboot will get it working again. Tried numerous software and hardware fixes, including but not limited to replacing the thermal compound of the video card and processor, replacing the cooling fans, reinstalling the video drivers, making sure the onboard video driver is up to date, performing utilities such as the DISM and check disk, which DISM and check disk, that's check disk is looking to see if there are any corrupted files on the drive. And DISM is when you tell Windows to look at an online repository of Windows files, compare those to what's on your computer, and if anything is wrong, pull a copy from the online repository. And it's
well, online or on disk or some other location. But to say briefly, when I took my last Windows exam, the DISM questions on there were the ones I'm like, I never use this. Why I'm gonna guess. And you know what I started doing 6 months after that? Using the DISM utility at work.
Because if there's a corrupted file on your system,
or if you need to inline drivers to a system that might otherwise not boot because the image is slightly different than what you're applying it to, which is what I was doing.
Yeah. The only solution I've yet found is turning off the setting entirely so the screen never turns off and just manually turn the brightness way down when I'm not using it to avoid screen burn. Any thoughts about what might have caused this problem, whether it can be fixed? All right, so I'm taking it's not responsive to the keyboard or the mouse. Just as a test, one thing I would try here is connecting an external mouse or an external keyboard, a USB connector. just to see how it behaves with the external hardware and seeing if we can rule out if there's some weird thing going on there and
Yeah,
see if
because
it'll respond to those.
there is issues and have been plenty of issues in the past where one driver thinks it's waiting on something else and it won't let you do anything because it's waiting on a response for something, driver or service or something, and that's a cause of lockups. The one thing I noticed you didn't do, and I agree it's a big step, was a fresh install.
Yeah.
Which is a big step. You have to back up all your data, do a wipe the drive and install from scratch. That may solve the problem if it's driver corruption or driver mismatch. Because here's the thing, it's not necessarily your video drivers that are causing the problem.
Yeah.
It could be any other driver that is just causing the system to lock up and is having an issue in relation with the video driver. I think I've mentioned on the show before, on a previous computer, I used to have a video card, not a video capture card, a video card I ran cable into so I could watch TV on my screen here. So watch cable TV. It interfered with printers. I couldn't print while that TV was on.
It was probably IRQ. And I'm willing to bet even way back then, it was probably an IRQ conflict. Yeah. Something like that.
Well, and I couldn't print while I was watching TV. And if I closed the TV program, I had to go in and kill the process because it didn't terminate properly. And then my printer would go, oh, there's print waiting, and spit out print. So it's sometimes very weird. And the reason it's so very weird so many times is because no programmer can test all the possible combinations of software and drivers and things you might have done with the computer, or even all the ways they might have minorly corrupted something. This could literally trace back to a single registry setting that somehow got toggled from 0 to 1. And if you toggled it back, if you knew what it was, everything starts working again.
I'll tell you a few months ago, actually more than a few months ago, it was a while back, I was traveling with my laptop. I think it's when we went to Luke and Gretchen's wedding. And all of a sudden, while I'm in the airport, my keyboard stopped responding. And I'm like, what the hell? And I couldn't get it. My keyboard and my touchpad were like, what the heck is going on? So I got it back home and I rebooted it. Things were fine again. Got it back home. It was doing it again. I even went so far as to replace the keyboard. It was cheap. It's like $10. I can get a brand new one. I replaced the keyboard in my laptop. Still didn't
fix it.
Reinstalled Windows. Problem went away. Hasn't come back.
Yeah.
Weird as hell. I reinstalled.
It's one of those things that's next to impossible to trace down, except by luck.
I reinstalled the trackpad drivers. I went through a whole bunch of stuff. And but then
one of the reasons for this, but what reasons why this, reinstalling drivers, etc., may not work. A lot of software, let's be honest, is kind of poorly written, especially with uninstalled programs, where it might not get all the settings, things that might have changed, or things that might have been changed with an update. The uninstall might not get all that stuff. So you've got legacy settings in your registry or in a settings file or in a config file or something. And so when you reinstall, it goes, oh, hey, my settings file's here. And so you're still screwed up.
Yeah. So I hate to say it, but just my instinct here is if maybe try the external keyboard and mouse and see if it responds to those where it doesn't respond to the ones built into the laptop. And if that doesn't work, you might be in a point where I would wipe and replace Windows. There's a reason why.
Always back up your data first.
Right. There's a reason why a lot of repair places, instead of trying to go in and granularly sort out individual files and registry settings, and sometimes a problem is so stupid and complex and under the hood, you would have to be a genius freaking detective to track it down. that there's a lot of, I mean, Mike, if a computer starts acting up where you work,
Yeah.
what do you do?
It depends on what it is.
Right.
So sometimes it's a known issue. We go, oh, this is the issue. We know how to fix this. For example, some of our computers, the models we use, will randomly drop the USB stack. I take them over to one of our local techs. We have our own in-house tech guy that we pay for, because he has admin rights on things that I don't.
Mhm.
And he reloads the USB stack. We're good to go. If it's something like, oh, the machine won't connect to the domain because the domain cert is out of date, again, I take it to him. Some things I can fix. Someone comes to me and says, hey, my computer's overheating. I go, let's pop the back panel on this. Okay, you've been using this in the kitchen again. I'm just going to assume this white powder is flour. Compressed air.
But
Done.
how often do you
Other things, we wipe the computer.
Yeah. How often do you do that? Do you do a wipe on a system that's acting up?
A complete wipe to rebuild?
Well, just do an image rebuild, just do an image wipe and start over.
I would say my department averages probably one a month.
Yeah, it's
that's over about 600 people. So
because taking the time to try to dig down,
troubleshoot it is ridiculous. It's not worth it unless we're trying to resolve this is happening to everyone. We need to figure out what the root cause is.
Yeah. Typically the most cost-effective, fastest, and the reason people do a wipe and reinstall is usually it works with a lot of it usually does the trick. So that's
I'm gonna give an example of when it won't. We've got a Windows patch at work that is not applying right now. And I know why it's not applying. Because it gives an error code that says if your recovery file, if your recovery partition is not at least this much free space, this patch will not apply. And I go, our recovery partition is not that much free space.
Yeah, I've been seeing about that because the default recovery partition size is too small for the patch. I don't know how Microsoft did this, but it's been going around. It's so stupid. You have to go in and actually manually reconfigure the size of the recovery partition. That patch is that is like, how do you do that? There's like the standard size is like 350 megabytes, I think, right?
Yeah, and this patch requires 250.
Or yeah, and you already have stuff
but yeah, you already have more than 100 on there,
right?
Because that's why it's there.
The recovery partition already has data on it, and you need more. So yeah, it's a gigantic cluster. Yeah, I was made aware of that one. All right, that's going to do it for us for this week. We'll be back next week at 9 p.m. Eastern. If you have tech questions for us and Mike, you can send those to requests@radiodeadair.com or simply drop them in the YouTube comments. Like we just did for that one. We can pick it up and see if we can give you a hand with it. But yeah, I mean, it's going out of here. The one piece of advice I would give you, there are a lot of software issues that the reasons places and techs will do a system wipe is because it works quite often to fix the problem. So,
and it's going to be a lot faster, especially if you're paying for it.
Yeah.
So if I had to take a machine to a service center and say, please sort out what's wrong with this machine, and if they come back and say, okay, it'll either take us 15 hours to sort out the machine, or we can just reinstall Windows inside an hour. I'm going to go, I've backed up my data, reinstall Windows.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, folks, we'll see you next week. Y'all take care. Good night, everybody.